this video I want to talk about kind of the history and folklore of reishi mushroom. And I'll be brief because there's a lot to it. So reishi mushroom, otherwise known as lingqi, which means spirit herb or god herb or heavenly herb, it's been called the mushroom of immortality, the herb of good fortune and longevity for thousands of years. If you look at the Forbidden City, you look at, the summer palaces in that time frame, you see it ubiquitously throughout the architecture, throughout the clothing, throughout the artwork, throughout the literature. There's references to it all over the place. And even in Taoist literature, it was called, the magic mushroom, and it was always sought after for its, potentially immortality benefits. So the potential, that didn't sound very good, but its potential to bestow immortality upon the person who took it and upon the person who found it. And it was said that in ancient times, if you found a reishi mushroom, to not tell anyone, to not tell your closest family members or friends, you should just keep it secret. And you should really, because if someone found out, they might want to take it from you, or they might know, they might suspect that, oh, you're gonna develop magical powers or whatever. It sounds a little weird, a little out there to our consciousness, but you gotta think of the time frame that this came from. So Reishi has this historical thing to it, which if you hear this, you probably think, yeah, that's cool. And then you're on to clicking on to your next page, but you gotta think that, you're gonna ask yourself, well, what other herbs do I know of that are on chairs, in palaces, on the walls, on the overhangings of doors, in paintings ubiquitously throughout the time frame, in the literature, on clothing, on crowns and heads, on the top of staffs, in sculptures, in statues of sages and holy men and Buddhas. They're always holding a reishi or pointing to a reishi. Please name one other herb that has this history to it. I would love to hear about it. So to me, that's all I really need to know about it, to think, okay, well, there has to be something there, because all these people couldn't be wrong. Sure, it was a different consciousness and a different thing, but who's to say that's a bad thing? Just because we're scientific and we have tools and we can say, oh, well, that chemical does this, who's to say that's necessarily better? Maybe looking at it more intuitively and artistically could lend ourselves to more creativity and more insight and more of a broader holistic perspective to what's actually going on with the herb. So Reishi's been studied scientifically for 20 years or so, because it's only been able to be cultivated since the late 70s. Otherwise, before then, it always had to be found wild, and which was why it was so rare and expensive. But now that it's been cultivated, they've actually just done a lot of study on it. So in 20 years of research, and if you know anything about the way things work in a clinical setting or in a professional setting or at colleges or anything, the pace is pretty slow and it's pretty annoying. So you got to think 20 years, there's only so much research that could have been done. So what about all the stuff that we haven't discovered? Even though what we have discovered says that reishi is by far the most chemically active. It has the most healing, beneficial chemicals of any substance that's been discovered. It has the most active healing chemicals of any substance that they've really studied and analyzed. And that's just what we have discovered. Who knows what we haven't discovered, because it works on us, etherically and subtly and on a spiritual level as well. That, how do you measure that chemically? You really can't, other than, it, calms the nervous system or changes the brainwave state or modulates these hormones. So let me check my time. So that's a little bit about reishi, the history and the folklore. And I posed a lot of questions because I say these things to people and it goes over their head, or they just don't think about it. But I challenge you and I ask you to just sit and really think about it and compare. Okay, well, there's all of this history and folklore and energy and reverence and worship around this one substance, but for whatever reason I may or may not even be attracted to it or really value it. But what other herb do I know of that has the same or even anything close to the amount of reverence and history and folklore and worship. Odds are you're not going to be able to come up with anything. So to me, the next step would be, okay, well, what am I consuming right now? What herbs primarily am I consuming as a real, backbone or a real foundation to my program? And what's the history with them? What, how long have people really sought after them? What have people really said about them? How much study has been done for them? How active are they chemically, etc.? And then do a little comparison, and then ask yourself how logical that decision is. And I mean, this is just where I'm coming from. You can completely disagree with me. That's totally fine. This is just the thought process that I've used to come to my decision to realize that reishi is by far the most beneficial substance that I could possibly ingest, and that I have ingested and I will ingest for the rest of my life. Which, a little, side note to this is that this is just, me 3 years after reishi, 4 years, 5 years after reishi, not who knows what 30, 40, 50, 60 years of reishi looks like. Because it is a tonic, and it is always taking whoever consumes it to a higher level of balance and harmony and energy and consciousness. So this is just a couple of years. I mean, let's find someone who's been taking it for 50 years. Let's go somewhere in China and find a sage who's been living on it for, his whole life. See what their consciousness is like. So that's just another little bit for thought. If you have any questions or comments, post them below, and I'll talk to you soon.